All right, good early morning, everybody. I'm meteorologist Tim Pandajis. We're closing in on quarter past the hour here at 1 a.m. on your Wednesday morning. And we've got showers and storms out there, a squall line developing off to our west that has ignited several severe thunderstorm warnings. Still, our main concern is going to be for some gusty winds. So let's first get out of the way what the warnings that are currently in effect are across our area. And that's going to be encompassing all the areas out towards Brenham. So those actual warnings right now, let's put them up here and they'll pop up across our area. So we've got them up until 1:30. So for about another 15 minutes or so, this could be for Brazos, Grimes, Waller, and Washington, affecting over 200,000 people. Gusty winds. Notice how elongated this warning polygon is. Another one off towards the west there, affecting not as many people at all. So let's talk a little bit more about what's going on radar now, because there is a lot happening all across our area right now. Lots of lightning and thunder, very, very heavy rain too. And what's interesting with this is if we put it in motion, say the last 2 hours, it's been really moving a lot quicker over the last couple of hours, picking up that forward momentum. We've also been tracking the amount of lightning within these cells. It's been rather constant, so it's not been in a strengthening stage of its overall life cycle, which is the good news. They're kind of plateauing, but they do have gusty winds, and I want to show you that feature right here because we use our velocity feature. That is a radar product that we typically use to kind of diagnose where there are couplets or spins in the atmosphere. That's why we call it a rotation detector. So if we get a little close-up look of what's going on in some of these areas, you can see some couplets for sure, especially as we get out, let's go out towards the Brenham area. You can see there are a few couplets there. I zoomed in a little bit too far, but if we go a little bit farther out here, you can see that there definitely are some signatures. There we go, especially off towards the west of Brenham right now. And if we put a couple of those areas on the map and kind of see what the speeds would be of some of these winds, they're rather impressive, especially out here well west of Brenham, 55 miles an hour. So we're getting that from the radar site here, the KHOU radar site. We're probably like 30 miles from the radar site there, so the radar goes out at an angle. And it's sampling the atmosphere at a height. So this is not at the surface. This is a loft, 55. But what's going on is that the very heavy rain is suppressing those strong winds to the surface. So it could be that resonating there, which is why these areas here are under a severe thunderstorm warning for the main threat of gusty winds in excess of 70 miles an hour. So this is the setup here for the Brenham area. Notice the elongation of the warning polygon. That's for the strong straight line winds that we're seeing here on radar, indicated just with the bowing echo that's setting on up out towards Bryan and Brenham. Washington seeing the kind of brunt of it right now. In fact, if we go over there on our camera angle and zoom in on Brenham again, we can really see that this area is not only seeing heavy rain, but also lots of lightning and thunder. And if we switch things back over to the velocity, you see the strongest of the winds still just off to the west towards Burton. So they're traveling along 290 near Zionville, Gay Hill, and then eventually towards Brenham on 36J there, the junction. So we'll see some strong winds there in just a short while. Bigger picture though, when we look at the radar and look at the lightning, let's go back to our home screen. We're not overwhelmed with the amount of lightning like we've seen in past instances. There's a lot of reasons for this. Usually you get highly electrified storms when there's a lot of moisture content in the air. If you're outside today, we only topped out at 80 degrees officially at Bush. And we weren't very humid either. So we don't have the heat, we don't have the high humidity either, so these storms are not able to take advantage of that and build up vertically. A lot of these on a vertical section are going up about 30,000 feet. Still high. It's where airlines, travel. But usually get 35, 40, 45, 50,000 feet, get that vertical depth. Those updrafts can really develop a lot of friction within the clouds and electrify themselves. So we are seeing lightning strikes out there that, around 300 to 400 or so, but nothing terribly impressive. Really looking at this line here out towards Bryan. Look at this Boeing signature here, Navasota, Keith. Heavy, heavy rain there. In fact, let's look at some of the rainfall data. Actually, let's go back here first and just look at some wind reports possibly. And I don't see any here in our area, which I'm not really surprised because we haven't seen the system over our area for quite some time yet. But off to the west, when it moved through the Austin area earlier, we did have some reports. Like here's one just south of Austin. Thunderstorm wind gusts, Bergstrom International Airport there. 50, 55, 60 mile an hour winds certainly weren't out of the question. Now on radar, we've been talking about lightning, heavy rain, and wind, but what's been noticeably absent is the presence of any hail. And as I take this off here, the legend, you're not seeing any indications anywhere of there being any hail present. Good news, this is not a hail event for us. We're looking at the gusty winds, very heavy rain, and the good news with the rain, we'll go back to the radar here to show, kind of amplify what we mean by this. So we've got radar, current image, and if we go out in time, or go back in time, I should say, the last 2 hours, it's moving very progressively, quickly through our area. It was in Austin just an hour and a half ago. Now it's already in the Brenham area, Washington County, and it's picking up that forward momentum. Will be in downtown, likely within the next 90 minutes to 2 hours. In fact, we can put we'll put it stopped here, and then we will put a track on it for you. So here's what it looks like now. And we'll put a storm track on it and put it out. It's moving at around 60 miles an hour. So it has picked up speed on this bow here, and we'll move it off into the area here. So we're getting some of these spots that are going to be moving in Belleville. Got about 5 minutes until it heads towards you. 129 for Hempstead. Eagle Lake just after half past the hour. 149 East Bernard, Spring around 156. So all within the next hour, these areas will be encountering some of the rough weather. Gusty winds, possibility of some small hail. We're talking pea-sized, if any at all. And really the gusty winds and a lot of heavy rain too. Some of the other features we've got going on here is there's one particular cell. Let's put a scope on that, and we can kind of see what's going on inside the storm. So check this out. We can move it along the storm path, and we're looking at the velocities here within the storm. You can see where there's greens and reds. Greens is going to be moving towards the radar site, reds away. It's the direction in which the winds are moving relative to the radar site. When we get those little couplets, we'll get the reds and greens close to one another, and we're not seeing any instances of that, which is good news. This is not a tornadic event. It's a straight line wind event, and the difference is that when there's damage, it's all blowing in the same direction. With tornado damage, it's really kind of chaotic, and trees and debris is strewn all over the place. But we're not seeing that in this particular situation. And if you are getting wind gusts, in fact, let's look at some of the velocity signatures once again. And they're not all that impressive just yet. Some of them may be verifying down to the ground that are a little bit more impressive. Like, let's see here. Zoom in on some of the brighter spots as we go out towards the Bryan area again. We'll switch up radar sites, and we'll put on here some of these areas, 43 miles per hour, 50 miles per hour, and notice out down towards Giddings, what that's looking like, still 50 miles an hour. So again, as I mentioned earlier, some of this is mixed up a little bit in mid-levels, and it's getting mixed down to the surface. So some of this is translating through some of these severe thunderstorm cells, others not so much. So we'll go back to home here and see what it looks like on the bigger picture. Let's see. And we've got that line of storms in our western zones. And it looks like brand new severe thunderstorm warnings just outside of our viewing area here, but the whole line is actually being warned, which is, if you look at the big picture here of what's going on in Texas, I mean, there's just a lot of activity all up and down. In fact, the radar sites showing things nationally. You can see all the activity here over the last 2 hours, kind of consolidating and picking up that forward momentum and dropping its way on off towards the south. So this is going to be an ongoing thing for probably the next 2 hours, and then really kind of sailing towards the coastline and eventually into the open Gulf of Mexico. So that's the good news there. Haven't seen any storm reports as of late, so that's the good news too. And our local radar is still just showing the heavy, heavy rainfall, some gusty winds as well, and lots of lightning too. This is unfortunately going to be one of those events that if you're up watching now, and this is about to head towards your area, you're probably not going to get to bed for the next hour, hour and a half until it blows through. It's going to be loud with the wind gusts, with the lightning and thunder, and of course the heavy rain as well. Something we haven't talked about yet is the rainfall totals. Let's look at just the 1 hour precipitation. So we had talked about how this might be an issue in terms of some minor flooding or street flooding, because we were looking at the potential of there being 2-inch-an-hour rainfall rates, which would be the threshold for flash flood warnings. We haven't been seeing that, and here's radar indication over the last hour of rainfall total. So if you look at the legend up here, 2-3 inches, maybe if you're lucky, as radar indicates, out to the the west of Bryan, Burton area down to Gonzales along 290. So not terribly impressive rainfall totals as of yet. Go back to radar. You can see that the rain, when it is coming down, indicated by the reds and oranges and maroon colors, is very, very heavy. And you can see it a little bit better when we take the lightning off of this. Lots of heavy rain here out towards the Burton area, and there's the severe thunderstorm warnings that we're still up for another 6 minutes for Grimes, Waller, and Washington. That's affecting over 200,000 people. So keep that in mind there. And you can see this as we look at those velocity winds once again. So this is kind of a little bit mixed bag. It's a little confusing. We're pulling the Houston radar here. That's overlapping with the radar off towards the Austin area. So if we move it a little bit closer, you can see it switches radar sites. We're a little bit closer to this radar site here, so the Brenham area is getting a better sampling of the wind speeds out in this general area. So if we zoom in over there, look at some of these wind gusts are a little bit more impressive here. We'll go back over to velocities and check out some of these brighter pinks and purples and yellows. 56 miles per hour. So all of these, at least on the radar, are coming in below severe criteria. Still gusty, still can do damage, still can cause power outages. But right now they are below severe criteria. So that is the good news here. And as I mentioned when we first started this broadcast, the overall line, we're not seeing strengthening, which is the good news. It's kind of plateauing. And we kind of get a signature of that by this. This is kind of an interesting way to do things. So we can sample the lightning in some of these cells. So that cell right there that has the warning on it, 130 strikes, and this is just in the last 10 minutes or so. And it hasn't been increasing. If we were seeing this storm strengthening, we'd see this number going up at a pretty steady pace. Not seeing that. What's really driving the severe weather with this is the gusty winds. And putting this in motion, it is traveling at a pretty decent speed. A 2-hour loop here shows it covering a lot of real estate in that 2-hour window. I believe this cell, when it was warned, was moving at 50 to 60 miles per hour. So the cells themselves are cruising. And if you look at it here, in terms of how fast it's moving in the area that it's going to cover in just a short amount of time. So it's, where's it? Right there, and there it is to Houston. About 63 miles from Houston. Say it's moving at 50 to 60 miles an hour. Within an hour 15 or so, it may be in the downtown area. And it is starting to fill on in as well, because you can see some more showers and storms developing here out into the spring area, out ahead of it. And what's interesting, what's probably driving these near Magnolia, Tomball, and Cypress, is that earlier that line, as it matures and then collapses, it sends out something called an outflow boundary. And what that is, it's almost like a micro scale cold front. It digs under the warm, moist air, forces it to rise, and can sometimes lead to development out ahead of the main line. And that's likely what we're seeing here, some of these flaring on up with some lightning too, so they're building quite quickly. So that's an area to watch as we go through the next half an hour or so. Bigger picture again as we wrap things up, still ongoing severe thunderstorm warnings. I don't see any reason why these would not be extended farther to the east-southeast and eventually encompassing portions of Harris County over into Montgomery. Right now it's just bordering it out into Grimes and down south into Katy, eventually into Fort Bend. So this is going to be impacting the entire area. Also, I should mention that watches are up, severe thunderstorm watch for our entire area until 5 a.m. So this is expected to hold together as it hits the coastline within that time. Let's look at the modeling here because we're getting hourly updates on these models. Here's the line, initializing recently. So it's getting a good handle on what's going on at present time. And as we go out in time, the next 2 hours, hour actually, pushes on into our western zones. This is actually a little bit behind schedule from what we just saw on radar. Going out to 3:30, it is right down the center of the I-45 corridor through downtown Houston. Gusty winds likely still a factor here. Fast forward another hour and a half, it's moving towards the coast and eventually offshore into the Gulf of Mexico, and then gone by 7 or 8 a.m. So once it moves into our area, it's not going to be hanging around for long. That's another reason why we're not going to be seeing massive rainfall totals. Our main priority, our main threat, is going to be for damaging wind gusts. Still, right now, we're not seeing anything verify above severe criteria, which would be over 55 to 60 miles per hour. Well under that so far. So still can cause some damage. Large hail, as you saw, is not a factor. Tornado threat is minimal. And the street flooding risk is probably could be lowered even more so because we're only expecting half inch, maybe an inch, locally higher in some areas, not enough to cause any major issues. So that's the latest. We'll have another update. Kim Castro and Pat Cavlin will be in a little while. If anything changes, we will join you on the digital side or, if need be, cut in on the TV side as well. Till then, stay safe and stay updated.